Hi everyone, I'm Pedro Moreira da Silva and I'm product designer working in the Agentic Duo in the IDE. These are some flows that I've been working on with Taylor and also Nicole that I'd love to get your feedback on. The biggest and I think most fleshed out part is this section that you can see here called dialogue management. And it basically includes a number of layers that build on top of each other. So first we have the understanding layer. The understanding layer is basically where we try to understand when the system receives a prompt from the user, if it's within the limits, token limits or character limits, and it goes through a number of checks, including to understand if it contains multiple intents, so if it combines different questions or requests in the same prompt, and then process them to understand if it's readable, if it's within limits, if it's appropriate, is it specific enough, and also to understand what is the intent. Is it a dialogue intent or a task intent? And from these, we then jump into the other layers. So the next layer would be the task layer, which is used to identify, okay, what is the task? What is the type of task that the user wants with this prompt? And there are a number of checks here as well. And essentially, we divided the types of tasks into three. So first of all, we have information tasks, and these are primarily to analyze and retrieve existing information. And you can see some examples here below. Then we have decision tasks, which also have some examples here, which are to help the user make a decision, choose an option, how should I approach a specific problem. And these are slightly different from the information tasks because it can use existing information, but there's more creativity involved. Now we are asking for the judgment of the LLM to provide us some insights. And it's also different from action tasks because decision tasks only explain what an action, what an approach could be, or maybe how you could even implement something and share some code, but it does not do it for you. It does not add the code or make inline suggestions or change the files in the code base or anything else. And then the actions are three types, which are fleshed out a little bit later once we get to the action layer. But they're essentially object actions, like generate a React component for a user profile page. There are plan actions, which are to modify the plan, add a new task for error handling, or assistant actions, which is how the user can ask to modify certain things about the assistant itself. So for example, starting a new conversation or compacting the conversation. You'll notice that for some of the responses of Duo, I've already included some information about what is the structure of the response and some examples of user prompt response pairs. These need still to be fleshed out more, hence this big red to do. But you already find some example of these here and there. Then from the task layer, once we've identified the type of task, information, decision, or action, we continue to the tool layer, which will help identify what are the tools that we need for that task, and also highlight that we need to show in the UI which tools are being used. And from there, we decide if it's an action task or not. So in this case, if it's only an information or decision task, we don't need to proceed to the action layer, which will again perform operations. We should only respond in the chat with the information, with the output. If we continue to the action layer, we then have the object, plan, and assistant actions more fleshed out with examples. And there are a number of things happening here, which then continue to the planning layer if it is needed. And the planning layer, among several things, has this interesting concept of a standard workflow, which is something that we began talking about if we want to prescribe first-class workflows, certain preset workflows that we already know what is the more or less the plan that should be carried out. We should know more or less what is the automation level for these workflows, if we can suggest to do it automatically or not. And this is also something that maybe we also want customers to be able to create for their organization, certain workflows that are prescribed and that their users can call at any time. And there's also the interesting bit here that you'll see that maybe not often, and we need a plan. Sometimes we can just keep a plan altogether, and that should be based on a risk assessment, right? So if we don't have a standard workflow, if it's going through, the normal generation process of a plan, and we realize, no, maybe it's a very straightforward task, and it can be immediate action. There's this card here that talks a little bit about how can we decide between immediate actions and just doing the action on the user's behalf, or maybe being a little bit more cautious and going with a plan first approach. And there's also below some examples of what immediate actions could be versus plan first approach examples. And finally, we have the execution layer where the actions would be carried out. And so we have, automatic and interactive modes. And there's a number of things going on here, from how we handle, generation of changes and applying changes or suggesting changes to running commands. And in some of these, diagrams, you will also find some references to this user iteration loop, which is up here in this top left corner. And you can click on this link to navigate to it directly, or it should. Well, this one is broken, but I'm going to make sure that link is fixed. And this user iteration loop is basically a shorthand to show how we can work with the user's responses to Duo's suggestions. So if Duo is suggesting a plan, if Duo is suggesting a command to run in a terminal, if Duo is suggesting certain file changes, how can the user respond to those? Either they accept, they reject, they ask for modifications, or even make modifications directly, and other responses. And how do we handle all of this? This is, I think, a very interesting part, because if there is a task in progress, if there's a plan that is active and there's a number of tasks that will happen after the current one, how do we ensure that any requests that the user makes, any rejections, or any changes that they make directly to the code base are in line with the plan, if they are compatible or not? And so I also added this card here that talks a little bit about maybe how we can check for compatibility and what does that mean, and how also Duo can perhaps adapt its plan and its approach based on how the user responds to these. And finally, there's this amazing diagram that Nicole put together that talks about the different agent systems. So we have a single agent system, we have a multi-agent system, and we also have a multi-agent system that is not in parallel, that you have sequential and parallelized agents working together. I'd like to get your feedback on mostly how does this dialogue management feel to you, if there's something very clear that is missing, if the information here is enough for you to start making sense of this, if you have any questions about how could this interact with whatever we have already implemented. And then I'll also like your feedback to understand what is the approach that we are thinking for this Agentic Duo, if it's more of a multi-agent system, and if so, how is that working as a multi-agent? Do we have it in sequential process? Do we have it parallelized? Maybe, when I was looking at this multi-agent system, if we did go with that, maybe we can think about, different agents for the different layers. But anyway, I love your feedback on that. Here below, you're also going to find a work in progress user flow. Don't pay much attention to that yet. I'd like you to primarily focus on this part here at the top. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to hear your feedback soon. Cheers.